The warning signal. The emergency transmission crackled through the void of space, carrying with it the dying breath of an entire civilization. Admiral Thane of the Zephyrian Empire stood before the massive holographic display in his flagship's command center. His forearms crossed behind his back as he listened to the desperate message. "This is General Korax of the Krolix Defense Force," the voice wheezed through static. "To any who can hear this, we have fallen. Our worlds burn. Our people scatter like dust in the cosmic wind. But before we fade into history, we must warn you. There is a species in the outer rim, a small blue world they call Earth. They appear weak, divided, primitive. Do not be fooled. They are evolution's cruelest joke disguised as prey but born to be predators." The transmission cut to silence, leaving only the hum of the ship's engines and the soft breathing of the command crew. Admiral Thane's scales shifted, from deep purple to a lighter shade, a sign of curiosity among his kind. His second-in-command, Commander Vex, stepped forward with a datapad in hand. "Sir, our intelligence confirms the Krolix Empire has indeed fallen. They controlled 47 star systems before their collapse. Their military was considered among the most advanced in this sector." Thane's mandibles clicked together in thought. The Krolix had been a worthy adversary, their biomechanical warriors nearly matching the Zephyrian military in both skill and technology. For them to fall so completely and then waste their final moments warning others about a primitive species seemed illogical. "Show me what we know about these humans," Thane commanded. The holographic display shifted, showing a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star. Data streams flowed across the screen in the flowing script of the Zephyrian language. Thane's eyes, all 6 of them, focused on the information with growing amusement. Population: approximately 8 billion individuals scattered across one planet. Technology level: primitive fusion reactions, chemical-based space travel, no faster-than-light capabilities. Political structure: divided into nearly 200 separate nations, constantly at war with each other. Commander Vex highlighted specific sections of the data. "Our long-range sensors show they've had over 50 major conflicts in the past century alone. They fight over resources, territory, religious beliefs, and sometimes for reasons our analysts cannot comprehend. Their weapons are crude, but effective against their own kind. They've managed to develop nuclear weapons and have used them against themselves." Thane's laugh rumbled through the command center. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered 200 star systems through superior technology, unified command, and the wisdom that came from a species that had evolved beyond petty territorial disputes. These humans sounded like exactly the kind of fractured, self-destructive species that would crumble at the first sign of real opposition. "They fight themselves more than any external threat," Thane mused. "And the Krolix believed these creatures were dangerous?" "There's more, sir," Vex continued. "They've only achieved spaceflight within the last century. Their exploration of their own solar system is limited to unmanned probes and a few manned missions to their moon. They have no colonies, no asteroid mining operations, no orbital weapons platforms. They're barely more advanced than the Grethans were when we first encountered them. The Grethans had surrendered within hours of the Zephyrian fleet's arrival. Most species did. The Empire's reputation for mercy toward those who submitted peacefully was well known, as was their reputation for complete annihilation of those who resisted. But something nagged at Thane's consciousness. The Krolix had been proud warriors. They would not have used their final transmission to spread unfounded fears. He decided to dig deeper. "What else do our scouts report about human behavior?" Vex consulted his datapad again. "This is where the information becomes unusual, sir. Our stealth probes have been observing them for several months. Human behavior patterns are unlike anything in our databases." The display shifted to show surveillance footage from Earth. Thane watched as humans engaged in activities that defied logical explanation. In one clip, a human jumped into raging floodwaters to save a drowning animal. In another, humans were seen donating food and resources to complete strangers. Most puzzling of all were the humans who voluntarily entered dangerous situations to help others, sometimes dying in the process while saving people they had never met. They risk their lives for beings that offer them no genetic advantage, Vex explained. They form emotional attachments to other species and will fight to protect them. Some humans have been observed mourning the deaths of creatures they kept as companions, creatures that served no practical purpose. Thane's scales shifted to a deeper purple. In Zephyrian culture, such behavior would be considered a severe mental defect. Resources were precious, and energy was not wasted on actions that did not benefit the individual or the species as a whole. Perhaps this emotional instability is why they're constantly at war with each other, Thane suggested. It would explain their fractured society. That's what our analyst concluded as well, sir. But there's another pattern in their behavior that's difficult to categorize. The display showed footage of human conflicts throughout their history. Thane watched as small groups of humans faced overwhelming odds and refused to surrender. He saw humans continue fighting even when defeat was certain, even when surrender would have saved their lives. They don't fight to win, sir. They fight to ensure their enemy pays the highest possible price for victory. In many of their historical conflicts, the losing side has inflicted such devastating casualties that the victors were unable to capitalize on their success. Thane studied the footage more carefully. In one scene, a human settlement was surrounded by enemies with superior numbers and weapons. Rather than surrender, the humans destroyed their own resources and fought to the last individual. The attacking force won, but at such a cost that they were forced to retreat and abandon the territory. Wasteful, Thane declared, but not particularly threatening to a spacefaring civilization. There's one more thing, sir. Vex hesitated before continuing. The humans have developed something they call science fiction. They create stories about other species, about space travel, about conflicts with alien civilizations. Some of these stories are disturbing, elaborate. They seem to have anticipated many of the scenarios they might face in contact with other species. They've imagined biological warfare, technological infiltration, psychological manipulation, and asymmetric warfare tactics that our own military strategists find creative. Thane's mandibles clicked again. Creative was not a word typically associated with primitive species. Most civilizations developed along predictable paths, their military strategies limited by their technology and social structures. Show me examples. The display filled with images from human entertainment media. Stories of humans fighting insectoid aliens, humans battling robotic invaders, humans facing cosmic horrors beyond their comprehension. But what caught Thane's attention was not the enemies in these stories, but the human responses to them. Every scenario, the humans found ways to turn their weaknesses into strengths. They used their emotional bonds to coordinate resistance. They employed their tendency towards self-sacrifice to achieve victories that pure logic said were impossible. They adapted to threats with a speed that seemed to defy evolutionary principles. Interesting, Thane mused. They've prepared for situations they've never experienced. It gets stranger, sir. Many of their stories focus on humans being the dangerous ones. They've created entire genres based on the premise that humans are the monsters other species should fear. Thane pondered this information. It was unusual for a species to view itself as the threat, especially one as apparently weak as humanity. Most civilizations created stories where they were the heroes, the victims, or the chosen ones. But humans seem to have a clear understanding of their own capacity for violence. Enough, Thane decided. The Krolix fell because they underestimated their enemies or faced internal corruption. These humans are exactly what they appear to be. A primitive, fractured species that wastes energy on emotional attachments and self-destructive conflicts. They may be creative in their storytelling, but creativity means nothing against superior firepower and organization. Commander Vex nodded, but Thane noticed his scales had shifted to a pale blue, a sign of uncertainty. Prepare the fleet for departure, Thane ordered. We'll take the Sol system within a standard week. The humans will either surrender or provide us with an interesting target for weapon testing. As the command crew dispersed to carry out their orders, Thane remained before the display, studying the images of Earth. Something about the human data continued to trouble him, though he couldn't identify exactly what it was. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered 200 star systems through overwhelming force and tactical superiority. They had faced species with advanced technology, unified governments, and military traditions spanning millennia. They had never encountered a civilization that had defeated them through pure stubbornness and emotional attachment to impossible causes. But as Admiral Thane gave the order to begin the journey to Earth, he failed to understand the most important detail in all the human data. Humanity had never faced an external threat that unified them. All their conflicts, all their wars, all their divisions had been internal struggles. They had no idea what humans were capable of when they had a common enemy. The fleet departed for Earth, carrying with it the confidence of an empire that had never known defeat. Behind them, drifting in the void of space, the final transmission of the Krolix continued to repeat its warning to any who would listen. But no one was listening anymore. The Zephyrians were already committed to their course, and the humans remained blissfully unaware that their first contact with an alien civilization was about to begin. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change both species forever. Thuri, awakening storm. The first sign that something was different came when the Zephyrian fleet entered the outer edges of the Sol system. Admiral Thane expected to find a scattered collection of primitive observation satellites and perhaps a few unmanned probes. Instead, his sensors detected something unprecedented. Every human space asset, from weather satellites to deep space, telescopes had been repurposed and repositioned within 72 hours of the fleet's arrival. "Sir?" Commander Vex reported, his scales now a worried pale blue. "They're watching us. Every satellite, every space-based instrument, every radio telescope on their planet has been aimed in our direction." Thane studied the tactical display with growing confusion. The human response made no logical sense. They had no weapons capable of threatening his fleet, no shields that could protect their planet, and no means of escape. Yet instead of panicking or attempting to hide, they had transformed their entire space infrastructure into an observation network. "Are they trying to communicate?" Thane asked. "No, sir. They're just watching and recording everything." What Admiral Thane didn't know was that in a bunker deep beneath the Colorado mountains, Dr. Sarah Chen was coordinating humanity's response to the alien threat. A brilliant astrophysicist who had spent her career searching for signs of extraterrestrial life, she found herself face to face with the reality she had always hoped for and the nightmare she had never imagined. "We have a complete analysis of their fleet composition," she reported to the hastily assembled Global Defense Council. 147 ships of varying sizes. The largest appear to be command vessels, approximately 2 kilometers in length. Based on their formation and energy signatures, we estimate they could sterilize our planet's surface within hours. The silence in the bunker was deafening. Representatives from every major nation sat around the table, their usual political differences forgotten in the face of extinction. "What are our options?" asked General Harrison, the American representative. "Militarily? None," Dr. Chen replied, bluntly. "We can't fight them in space, we can't hide from them, and we can't negotiate from a position of strength." "So we surrender?" The Chinese delegate's voice was bitter. Dr. Chen turned to look at a screen showing Captain Marcus Stone, a retired military officer who had been recalled to active duty. Stone had spent the last 48 hours coordinating with military leaders worldwide, and his expression was grim but determined. "We don't surrender," Stone said firmly. "We do what humans have always done when faced with impossible odds. We make them regret ever finding us." Admiral Thane was beginning to understand why the Krolix had seemed so disturbed in their final transmission. The human response to his fleet's arrival was unlike anything in Zephyrian military databases. Instead of panic, there was organization. Instead of chaos, there was unity. Within hours of his fleet's detection, the humans had done something unprecedented in Zephyrian experience. They had stopped fighting each other. Every conflict on Earth, from minor border disputes to major wars, had been suspended. Enemies who had been killing each other the day before were now working together. "Sir," Vex reported, "we're receiving transmissions from Earth. They're not surrender offers." "What are they?" "They're broadcasting their history to us. Everything. Their wars, their disasters, their failures, and their recoveries. Thane watched in fascination as Earth transmitted terabytes of data about human civilization. They were showing him everything: the rise and fall of empires, the devastation of plagues that killed millions, the destruction of cities by natural disasters and warfare, and most importantly, how humans had survived and rebuilt after each catastrophe. The data painted a picture that made Thane increasingly uncomfortable. Humans didn't just survive disasters, they learned from them. They adapted. They grew stronger. "There's something else, sir," Vex continued. "They're broadcasting personal messages as well. The display filled with individual humans speaking directly to the camera. Children talking about their dreams for the future. Parents explaining what they would do to protect their families. Scientists describing their discoveries. Artists sharing their creations." But it was the military personnel that made Thane's scales shift to a deep, worried purple. "My name is Colonel Maria Santos," one human said, looking directly into the camera. "I've fought in 4 wars on 3 continents. I've seen cities burn and nations fall. But I've also seen humans do impossible things when they have something worth protecting. You want our planet? Come and take it. But understand this. We don't fight to win. We fight to make sure you lose." Another soldier spoke next. "Major David Kim, Special Forces. You think you know humans because you've watched us fight each other. You're wrong. When we fight ourselves, we hold back. We have rules. We have mercy. When we fight extinction, we have neither." The messages continued for hours. Thousands of humans all saying variations of the same thing. They would not surrender, they would not submit, and they would make the cost of conquering Earth so high that the Zephyrian Empire would regret ever finding them. Captain Stone stood in the makeshift command center that had been established in the Pentagon. Around him, military leaders from dozens of nations worked side by side, their national flags hanging together in a display of unity that would have been unthinkable just days before. "Status report," Stone ordered. "Every nuclear weapon on the planet has been armed and repositioned," reported the Russian general. "We can't reach their ships, but we can make sure they find nothing useful if they land. Biological warfare countermeasures are in place," added the British representative. "If they try to use biological weapons against us, we're prepared to release engineered viruses that will make their conquest Pyrrhic at best." "And the civilian population?" Stone asked. Dr. Chen answered this one. "Evacuation protocols are in effect for major cities, but we estimate 90% of the population has refused to evacuate. They're staying to fight." Stone nodded grimly. This was humanity at its most dangerous. Not when they were trying to win, but when they had accepted they might lose and decided to make their defeat as costly as possible. Aboard the Zephyrian flagship, Admiral Thane was receiving reports that defied every military manual ever written. "Sir, our psychological warfare broadcasts are having no effect," reported the communications officer. "We've transmitted surrender demands in over 300 languages, shown them the fate of civilizations that resisted us and demonstrated our weapons capabilities. Their response rate remains 0. 0? No government has attempted to negotiate, no military leader has offered to surrender, no civilian population has requested mercy. They're all just waiting." Thane was beginning to feel something he had never experienced in 2 centuries of military service: uncertainty. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered 200 star systems, but they had never faced a species that simply refused to acknowledge the possibility of defeat. What about their military preparations? That's the disturbing part, sir. They're not trying to build weapons that can hurt us. They're not attempting to evacuate their population or hide their resources. Instead, they're preparing to hurt us in ways our strategists never anticipated. The tactical display showed Earth's preparations. Humans were rigging their cities with explosives not to defend them, but to deny them to the invaders. They were contaminating their own resources rather than let them fall into alien hands. They were preparing biological warfare weapons designed not to kill the invaders but to make the planet uninhabitable for anyone. "They're willing to destroy their own world to prevent us from taking it," Vex observed, his voice filled with something approaching awe. But the most disturbing intelligence came from the humans' entertainment broadcasts. Instead of despair or panic, Earth's media was filled with stories of successful resistance against overwhelming odds. They were broadcasting historical accounts of small forces defeating larger ones, of civilians overthrowing occupying armies, of underdogs achieving impossible victories. They weren't just preparing to fight. They were teaching themselves to believe they could win. Dr. Chen stood before the Global Defense Council one final time, as the alien fleet approached Earth's orbit. "They'll be here within hours," she reported. "We've learned everything we can about their technology, their tactics, and their psychology. They're typical conquerors. They expect submission or swift victory. They've never faced a species that considers defeat acceptable as long as the enemy pays an unbearable price." "What's our plan?" asked General Harrison. Dr. Chen smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "We show them why the Krolix were terrified. We show them what happens when humans stop fighting each other and start fighting together. We show them that some species are too dangerous to conquer." As the Zephyrian fleet entered Earth's orbit, Admiral Thane made his final preparations for what he expected to be a brief conquest. His weapons were charged, his troops were ready, and his demands for surrender had been prepared in every human language. What he didn't know was that humanity had already won their first victory. For the first time in human history, every nation, every military, every civilian population was united behind a single goal: making sure that anyone who threatened their species would regret it for the rest of their existence. The Krolix had tried to warn them, but the Zephyrians had refused to listen. Now they were about to learn why the last words of a dying civilization had been a desperate plea to leave the humans alone. Earth waited, united and unafraid, ready to show the galaxy what happened when humanity decided that something was worth dying for.